So, Pocket Gamer, we're at the F2P Summit in London, and we've been talking to interesting people all day long, and we've managed to persuade one of them to come on camera. So, interesting person number one. Oh, sorry, bit of a juggle there. So, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us kind of what you've been up to?
So, I'm Tomas Rawlings, and I'm the design and production director at Game the News, a project of Auroch Digital, and we've been turning news into games. We kind of made a bit of a splash. A bit of a splash when we did what I believe is one of the first games ever to really cover an ongoing war. We created a game called Endgame Syria, and Apple rejected it.
Could you backtrack a little bit?
Yeah.
So how do you? Okay, so you have it. It's called. Say the name of the division.
It's called GameTheNews.net.
So the whole point of Game the News. What was the idea behind that? Is it on a more general basis?
Well, the idea is to I've done a lot of game jams and things like that, and so realise you can make games quite quickly. You don't have to. So the previous game I made, Call of Cthulhu: The Wasted Land, that was about a year of our lives sort of poured into that.
That's not a news game.
No, that's news. They're coming back. The old ones were dead. No, So I thought, actually, what about taking the opposite end of that? What if we create games really, really quickly? So what we started doing was churning out games, aiming for days rather than months, years to create a game. And so Endgame Syria is an example. That took us 2 weeks to create. We just put one out which has done very well for us, about the horse meat scandal called Cow Crusher. So that was 3 days.
It's interesting there, because obviously the kind of Syrian Civil War has been around for a while. It's a global thing. So everyone, not everyone around the world, but lots of people know about it, and it's kind of picked up media support. I mean, the horse meat thing is it's not just UK, European, but obviously doesn't really affect America. So I mean, do you worry too much about how local the news is? Obviously, you're based in the UK. We're based in the UK.
Not so much. I mean, at the moment, I would say we're really exploring with this form. I believe that there is a myth that gamers are disconnected from the real world. They don't care about life outside their little gamer bubble. And I just don't think that's true. I think actually there's loads of us who do care about the world around us. And the thing is, as gamers, well, certainly I do, think about the world often in quite gamey terms, And so for me, it's quite natural to express that interest in the world around us through the form of a game. And that's why, for me, as a games designer, Game the News works really well. And certainly from the feedback from players we've had, it's either stimulated interest in them or reflected interest they may already have. So I think there's something there.
In terms of the horse meat scandal, I mean, I'm not a game designer at all. I can imagine like a slightly funny game about horse meat scandal, but a game about the Syrian Civil War is a pretty brutal, nasty thing. I mean, that's not immediately what jumps to mind how I want to make a game. I can imagine making some sort of strategy game based on that. But I mean, how do you do that without? I mean, do you take sides? Are you happy to take sides?
Well, yeah,
it can be a difficult thing. I mean, maybe the Syrian Civil War is an easier one than some, but to a degree, every man's freedom fighter is someone else's terrorist. So.
Absolutely true, but I mean, I would say firstly that games are already political. How can you play something like Call of Duty and not see the politics in it? It's full of it. It's just that.
I think.
Yeah, but the politics are there. They're just not overt. In a way, we're just being a little more overt about that. Okay. But also, when you look at a news story, you don't expect that news story to tell you every single facet of it. So you watch a bit of Channel 4 News saying there's a bit on the Syrian Civil War. That's not the whole story, that's part of it. And a news game is the same thing, it's a slice of it. So with Endgame Syria, we have only really taken one aspect of it, and it came out of the question, should we arm the rebels? Yeah. And there was pundits on TV talking about it, this might happen, that might happen. And I was watching it and thinking, do you know, the way to represent that conversation really well is a game. Yeah. Because you can simulate the different outcomes, the different choices, and you can let the audience replay that, make the choices, and that way explore what works and what doesn't, in their own way. So I think games have something to offer the coverage of international affairs, and that's been one of the really interesting things. So
you make your game, Endgame Syria, all kind of happy, off it goes to the App Store, and then something else happens. So
Apple said no. So Google on Play Store straight through, and it's up there now. Apple said no.
And what kind of feedback did you get? Obviously, Apple can say no in various ways, can't they?
No. Apple pointed to a specific guideline within the App Store guidelines, which is around targeting what they call a known entity. So you're not allowed to make a known entity the subject or the enemy of a game. And because we're talking about a real conflict, they pointed to that. So we did a second version of it where we said, okay, what we'll do is known entities are things like, you know, the Assad regime, the various groups within the Syrian civil war, and we rename those. So you'd have something like, you know, say a Kurdish militia group might just become militia. So it still has a degree of what we're trying to communicate there, but there's less information, definitely.
And what happened?
They said no. And they pointed to the same guideline. And what it transpires is that I thought by entity they're talking governments, and in fact they name a few examples, you know, governments, groups, individuals. It turns out that they take that up to a country level. And they said, well, look, you can do Endgame Syria, providing you don't mention the word Syria. So we took that. It's a compromise. So we took that as a challenge. So we created Endgame Eurasia, where we replaced all of the real world locations and events in the game with ones from out of copyright fiction. So 10 points for anyone who can guess where Eurasia comes from.
Oh, what's the different one?
It's the content named in 1984. That there's
which to a degree is quite satirically kind of setting up Apple, isn't it? I mean,
it is a bit of satire.
Not just Apple, but even the whole kind of process.
Yeah, I mean, it's a satirical response to what I would say is a genuine question that these platform holders want to engage with. I get that Apple don't want to let everything through, and I'm not arguing they should, and I get that they want guidelines to stop really dodgy crap getting through, and I think that they should. But I think really games have grown up a lot. They've changed in their form. They change what they do. And there's a really good article, you know, a couple of articles that have been written about this that point to the difference in Apple's approach, which is they say if you want to criticize religion, if you want to talk about sex, if you want to talk about real world things, write a book. Don't make an app. And so what they're saying is that basically there's this world where all these serious people are having serious conversations about the world, but they're all, you know, they're writers and filmmakers and you know, people like that. And us games people, we're not allowed in. You know, we're left in the kitchen looking after the kids, so to speak. And I don't think that's fair. I think games have a lot to say, and why shouldn't we be in the room talking?
And you're going to continue saying them. So you had a new game out.
Yes.
And
well, we'll be coming out very soon. Yeah, we've announced a new game called, and I hope I pronounced this right, Narco Guerrera, which is which translates as the drugs war. So we're looking at the war on drugs, another, you know, fun
topic.
topic.
It doesn't mention countries or entities.
Well,
or whatever.
it mentions Mexico. It frames it in a slightly different way. But what I was really interested in this, so you know, I'm a big fan of strategy games, war games, military games. And I was looking at different conflicts around the world, and you realise you've got this conflict in the war on drugs, and it's been going on a long time, longer than I've been alive. And you think, well, how do you create a war that's unwinnable, it seems? So I thought, well, this is how they've done it. So I thought, well, why don't we frame that in a game terms? You know, why don't we create a simulation of the conditions of this conflict, and let's see if the player can win it.
So this is an unwinnable game. You created the unwinnable game.
We've created, I would say, if you like, a bit of an unwinnable war. But you know, we challenge the player to see if they can win it. And you know, it's not the only game mode. So there's a story mode that explores specifically, you know, the issue we're talking about. There's skirmish modes and multiplayer modes that actually allow the player to just enjoy the sort of strategy element that we've created. So in a way, we're matching up the seriousness of talking about a really important issue that should be engaged with something else. Just more gameplay. And I would say actually what this game does is invite those politicians who think that, you know, there's this fantasy scenario in their head called the war on drugs that they might be winning, and says, well, look, you know, if you can fantasize about it, us game developers are going to fantasize about it, and here you go.
And it's pretty, I mean, confidence-wise, are you going to get it through Apple, you think? Or hard to judge until it's gone in.
Difficult to judge. I hope so. I noticed actually there's already a game on the App Store around smuggling drugs into America. So if that gets through, hopefully us talking about it in a more serious way will.
Sure. Well, it's interesting. There have been over the years kind of attempts to do this kind of game. There have been kind of games made about smuggling drugs and things as well. Not on mobile games, but interesting to see how it. And then do you kind of from your games that you make, do you expect kind of an overt reaction at all, or is it just more on a kind of personal level? I mean, are you kind of political with a big P or a small P?
I think it go through phases. I would say a political with a small P. You know, care about stuff. You can't help but encode the things you care about into the games you make. And even as I say, even if you're not making overtly, you know, news games as we are, these values come through. So yeah, I think this is a serious issue, and I think it's an issue that should be talked about. And you know, we just choose to use games to do it.
Great, lovely. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.